Okay, welcome to a BASIS Stepping Stones to Awareness Fast Blast. This is the first one we've done, and I'm going to welcome on board Miles Johnston of the BASIS Project.
That's the big click.
And today we're going to be talking about cancer. We're going to talk about justice, the recent verdict on David Noakes, and about agriculture.
Right.
So,
Well, and we've got Caroline. So, Caroline, tell us what's going on here.
right, so aside from Brexit or non-Brexit, and really we shouldn't call it Brexit, should we? I mean, wasn't this a term that the media gave Brexit in the first place? So we're wanting to try to get away from the EU. We're escaping, but we're not. So apart from that, we're looking at the corruption, the justice system, and we've just had a court case judgment yesterday, as you know.
And
David Noakes, we both met him, didn't we, at the AV9 conference? And David Noakes had been distributing something called GC-MAF. And this is a substance.
explain what this mysterious
This is a
substance
substance.
I just have to grab a remote to keep talking.
This is a substance that is naturally occurring in the human body. But for some people, they stop producing GC-MAF. And so David Noakes was helping people. He couldn't say it was a cancer cure because you're not allowed to say you can cure
Well, the law
cancer.
says you cannot cure cancer with anything other than three things, and they're chemical things from the petrochemical industry, which is putting all these toxins in our food to start with.
And that's the 1939 Cancer Act.
That's the 1939.
So it was basically written for Big Pharma's benefit, would you not say?
Well, that's the whole point. It's they feed you, kill you. Oh, there you are. I think you're on that one. Or are we on
So
this one?
basically, that
there
was a
we are.
statutory law in 1939. And of course, the statutory law is the undoing of God's law. And that's where we need to be heading back to. We need to get rid of all these statutory laws
There
that
is
upset us.
a thing called universal law.
The universal law.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is working. It should work. That's it.
Right. So David Noakes hit the judgment yesterday.
Now, the thing is, who is this David Noakes
So
guy?
David Noakes,
Explain the story about that.
actually-
And also explain, we're going to explain the whole thing about universal law, which is something which the universe deals with, and then we're also going to explain common law, and we're also going to explain the corruption of the laws that's sort of happening at the moment. But David Noakes had a company. He was at AV9, and that's Alternative U9, which is a conference which is run by Ian R. Crane. And the aspect of his issue that we talked about was the European arrest warrant, right?
That's right.
So
that was David Noakes. We
that
did
was
an
David
earlier
Noakes.
interview,
So-
didn't we?
Yeah, so explain what all that's about.
So David Noakes was actually an ardent Brexiteer. He's produced videos from 2010 talking about the way the EU is set up and how we shouldn't fall for the European arrest warrant. That was something we covered earlier on this year.
Well,
And
what-
he was
what
being
does that mean?
subjected. So basically, he was being, the powers in France wanted to extradite him basically from Britain to France. But in the meantime, our judicial system wanted to try him in the UK.
Basically, they wanted to nobble him. They wanted to get rid of him. And this is an old fight which has been fighting with homeopathic medicine. They've had homeopathic medicine being attacked. It goes back to the 1800s. And so this idea that you can cure cancer with natural elements, which Mr. Noakes was doing, he was selling it. And what else was he doing? He was selling it and profiting from it. Dreadful, because he was running a business.
Well, because he couldn't, how could he get a license? Because the powers that be wouldn't allow him to have a license.
You see, the same thing with pirate radio. And if you want to get something done, you don't have a law, and so they constrict the law so that you can't do things because they're all in on it, on a backhander, to kill us, really.
Well, they just want to have the sole distribution themselves, the big
Sole-
pharma. I mean, you've
sole-
got the big pharma.
Soul being
Being the operative word.
yeah.
So you've got the two chief executives of Big Pharma that sit on the Medical Research
Be careful
Council.
here, we don't want to get sued.
No, I'm not going to mention any names.
Don't mention any.
And basically they constrict the whole situation. They're in charge of the NHS, basically. So what's the
the
alternative? What's been the alternative?
The Nazi thing, because we didn't win World War II, we simply acquiesced to a German invasion.
I think this is a situation where we're beginning to wake up, hopefully, and realise the impact that global corporations have on our everyday lives. With 1 in 3 people suffering cancer in their entire life, we all know somebody who's had cancer.
Now, you were reading a couple of books. Now, the thing about it is, we've had Graham Harvey on at Basis. The sort of stuff that we do with Basis is cutting edge stuff. Don't understand it for years, and then suddenly a few years later it all fits in. Now, we got 3 books here, which is explaining really what's going on here. Now, there's an face of a being in the middle of that, and there's very important reasons why it's there, because that book contains information which the authorities have been sitting on for almost 30 years.
Well, that's why we were looking at this book, wasn't it? Because
And
basically...
you've got Graham Harvey's books on the left and the right, and the reason why the ones in the middle is because we did an interview with a guy called Arfon, and BBC Northern Ireland are doing a programme on him this weekend, December the 10th, and he saw that thing in the middle, in Armagh, and there's connections with farms in Northern Ireland with an awful lot of sheep and cattle being mutilated gruesomely over a long period of time. Linda Moulton House has done this in America and other places. There is a very good team of people here in Britain who've been covering this, and Carl Nally and Dermot Butler have made this book and released this information. This has only been printed about a couple of months ago.
That book there.
And because we've got a sighting of somebody who's seen this being in broad daylight, you interviewed him, in broad daylight in South Armagh, and that's walking about 6 foot plus, and it's an ancient being, natural to the earth, and they're emerging and taking the sheep. They're also taking people, hundreds of them. This is a big deal.
Well, it was, yeah. I mean, it's become more mainstream now, isn't it, what you're talking
only because
about?
that information's been released, and there's BBC One are doing a programme on it, and we interviewed the guy, and that happens to be very similar to the thing that this guy encountered. But you were reading some stuff from Graham Harvey's book.
Well, it was.
Graham Harvey is a writer for The Archers, and he's published those books.
Well, linking in, I mean, you look for the root causes of problems, don't you?
Yeah.
And apart from the fact that we've got corporations that have taken over our court system, which means they work in favour of the bankers and the globals, the judge said last Friday, he basically asked David Noakes if it was worth breaking the law to produce and distribute GC math.
So we're dealing with a case, a thing that's in. He's just been sentenced.
It's just been sentenced, but David's response
is that he's been sentenced for selling a substance which cures cancer.
But you're not allowed to say cures cancer. But if you think about it, you know, the judge is asking Noakes if it was worth breaking the law. This is the statutory law that has been set up to protect Big Pharma. So
that essentially the chemical drugs industry, which pushes chemicals, which gives us cancer in the first place and leaches the soils. The whole point about the book is that you were reading is that the farming industry is leaching, the chemical farming industry is deliberately feeding cattle in such a way that they get diseased, which actually, and they market them just before they drop down dead. Isn't that what's in it?
But the thing was, David had to respond to the judge.
Yes, but then
and he
that
basically
means that we
said,
eat this food. The point is that we eat this food, then we get cancer, because the poisons are put in the food in the first place in the actual way the cattle are fed. And then at the end of this chain, people get cancer because the meat itself's poisoned.
Well, what actually happens
and then they go and stop you from actually trying to cure that.
Well, I think the thing
is... And these are natural things that they're killing. Natural... Okay, go ahead.
So David's response was it worth breaking the law to save lives? Absolutely. How could any judge go against that reply? It's like saying he would rather a person die than be treated. And obviously with the judgment, he would rather they die.
The judges and the justice system is in on a mass extermination of human beings, which is mass genocide.
Absolutely.
So these judges and these people could be actually hauled up on the basis of mass genocide because they're killing millions and millions of people while a bunch of people make a lot of money out of it.
And so that then brings us on to this book, and you were saying about Graham Harvey. And, you know, we all say these days when we buy our fruit and veg, oh, it doesn't taste like it used to taste. And that's what got me thinking. It says today's fresh foods rarely taste good. In fact, many of them taste of very little at all. I mean, don't you find tomatoes, strawberries, they don't taste of anything?
Now, you're reading from the We Want Real Food book.
That's right. And it says, nor do they contain the levels of vitamins, trace elements, and phytonutrients you'd have found in traditionally grown foods. So a revolution in the way they're produced has depleted them of the very things that once promoted good health. Our staple foods have been dumbed down. And basically, typical of the lost nutrients is something called a cancer-fighting compound called salvestrol. Now, I didn't know salvestrols existed.
Well, you do now because it's in that book.
But they're cancer-fighting.
He's a damn brave man. He's brilliant, Graham Harvey.
But if the foods are now having the salvestrols removed from them, these were the foods that, fought the cancer.
Yeah.
So we're losing out always round.
Yeah. So the important thing about this is that Cathy Morgan did the paper trail on this, and she did this in a number of the BASIS conference presentations. Cathy Morgan with an I has done the paper trail on the institutions set up in Britain to actually implement this stuff. And this all goes back to social experimentation that she's traced going back a long, long time. This is the MK Ultra programming and Project
Actually,
Monarch
could you
and all
talk
that.
about the MK Ultra program? Because moving on from this, on the Brexit trail, been trying to alert people to the fact that our military has been handed over to Brussels. The total control point being in Brussels.
Well, what people don't understand is, and our friend Michael Shrimpton has pointed this out, is that during World War II, which wasn't really quite the war we all been told it is, the project for Europe was essentially hatched, which essentially generated the EU that we're running now. So basically, the EU is a
well, there's no doubt about it. Since 1948, since 1948.
Well, what happened in 1948?
1948.
Yeah.
After the war,
Yeah.
World War
But
II,
Roswell
they
set up the CIA,
They
all those things.
started putting fifth columnists
Yeah.
throughout
Well,
the
they were already
military
there.
industry with committees.
They're all in there. That's the point about Cathy's work. The point about Cathy's work is that she's traced the paper trail of these institutions that were set up during World War II in this country.
So basically, how does the MK Ultra
And that's
work
why we
then?
get the...
Can you explain how the MK
Ultra
Ultra
is a population modification program, and there's a variety of levels of MK Ultra. And for instance, another BASIS witness, Nina Valentine, her grandfather was responsible for the Northeastern Health Board, and he was responsible, one of the things that he was responsible for was implementing MK Ultra into the Mental Health Act. So for instance, if you came up with any of these sort of observations, they would basically say, you're nuts, so we'll section you because you're waking up to what is going on. Essentially, it's a modern version of burning witches. Anybody who's sensitive and wakes up and knows what's going on, they take them into the programming, for instance. So the MK Ultra program is affiliated with a thing called the Monarch program, and Monarch Mind Control uses this thing called the Monarch Butterfly. And you'll notice in one of our witnesses, who was from Belfast, she actually had a traumatized daughter, and she had a T-shirt where the daughter had a monarch butterfly on her shoulders. That is a classic indication, a classic whistleblow of MK Ultra programming.
But the
which
thing
means
is
that she is essentially MK Ultra is about trauma-induced mind control. Trauma-induced mind control is essentially about traumatizing young children, i.e., buggering them until it's the buggering them so that the energies oscillate up and down the spine, shatter the psyche of the child. The child is then malleable, and then they're very useful for what they call alters or alternate personalities. So they can be programmed to do certain things without their actual base knowledge, because one aspect of the psyche breaks off, so it generates a psyche where you don't have this world of pain and suffering. So that's a safety valve for the psyche of the child to do that.
But how does that work in the military? Because what we're doing is we're handing out leaflets to serving military, and we're quite entitled to do that, because when those serving military went to Bosnia a few weeks ago, they actually landed with the EU logos on their arms.
Well, you've got to go back to Prussia and another basis.
But this is mutiny, surely?
No,
They're
no,
mutineering.
What's her name? Carla St. Louis did a research on this. Carla St. Louis did some work on this, and she's another basis interviewee. Basically, she was the daughter of a woman who was the editor of the U.S. Navy's internal magazine. And when she finished being the editor of that, she had a tragic road accident soon afterwards. But Carla St. Louis identified this thing where the Prussian, going back to Prussia in the early stages of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, basically they weren't getting a high enough kill ratio with the troops, right? So what they were doing was that they came up with a different way of training people, and this has actually been applied to schools in America, so that they end up training people to essentially obey orders and go and get killed. So that was one of the aspects of that they found in World War One, where the soldiers were playing football, didn't want to kill the other person. Basically, these are people who are being used to ordinary folk being used in combat, weren't killing enough people. There's a lot of people shooting things and shooting bullets off, but nobody dying. So this brings us into another realm where the contract that the soldiers are actually signing when they join the military are de facto selling their souls to a Luciferian contract in complex number space. So that's what the war memorials celebrate. So when you have a war memorial and you actually have the red and black poppy, you're actually contributing in a mass ceremony to ensure that the souls of all the soldiers are contractually handed over to Lucifer. Right?
Well, I mean, it does say in the Bible that you cannot commit yourself on an oath to anybody but the Creator.
But this is the problem with
the oath to the Queen.
The selling of souls, your birth certificate on the stock exchange. They are mass trading our soul energetics to complex number space, to other energetic domains outside 3D, which is where all these demonic entities come from, and these things are a little bit like that thing I showed you on that, which are part of creatures which come in from other domains to take us energetically. And this is what the whole point of football is, and films, is that you actually energetically are being conned into exchanging your intention and life force, or luge, is what people call it, and you actually being energy sucked and farmed. Right.
So the dark side is basically.
Well, the dark side is Lucifer
collecting.
And Satan, and of course this is why I talked to Michael Aquino, who is a very highly experienced psychological and intelligence officer in the U.S. military, and the U.S. military were essentially handed over to satanic forces in the 1930s. There's a whole thing about this. It was at Super Soldier Summit 2. That was all discussed. You need to talk to, there's certain people you need to talk to, which I can't currently remember.
But at the end of the day, the military is not opening up to us presenting them with leaflets.
Yeah, well,
because they're in they're in denial.
The thing about it is that they don't understand that they've been contracted through the EU, which is a German intelligence operation. Again, you've got to go back to Prussia, the people who were actually dealing with that, and then you've got to deal with some of the documentation going back to the Stockholm Agreement, going back to the 1700s, where the first stage of the ability to have reptilians inhabit human bioframes, what Tim Refat calls wetware. You actually put on a human and it's wet because we've got water in it. And
this might be a little bit a step too far for my audience.
It's a step too far for a lot of people, but they've got to realise that being conned, sold down the river, by a predator, which is
Well, I think the Brexiteers are
purpose
beginning
of it.
to understand that
Yeah.
they're being conned, and I think that they're looking for some sort of saviour.
But the point is, that's the whole point of the child abuse thing. The Jimmy Savile thing was an energy exchange, because these creatures, which look like this thing, that's sort of having a bit of a bad hair day, that's essentially a creature which sucks the energy from living tissue, and they need children, so that it sort of feeds off that energy exchange.
Well, there's no doubt.
Everything eats
There's no
something
doubt
else.
about it. I mean, there's another
Yeah.
court case on at the moment, Sabine McNeill, and she has reported back to
Explain all that.
She has reported back to the European Parliament that 1,000 children a month are disappearing in the UK. And where are they going?
That's a tiny number. They're going for rituals
Which
to
takes us
feed
into
these.
lots of other areas like Freemasonry.
Well,
I mean,
the problem with the Masons is they don't realise what goes on until you get this too late, and then they've been
basically,
caught.
once you get in, it's very difficult to get out.
For what people don't understand is that this is intrinsic to ancient wars which go back a long time, and the only way that these individuals can survive is to feed off the growth energies of children.
Okay, right. So let's finish
Again,
off
this
with.
is all on the Basis Project. It's also on the Amash interviews, where we did that way back in 2012, where we interviewed somebody, and there's certain trophies that they take the babies and take certain things out of them.
Well, the thing is, but even people who get to being adults, they're not living a fulfilled life because of the food we eat now. In particular, the food we eat, we're not getting to the hundreds, are we?
So the food, going back to the war,
Diabetes.
programmed, we're being killed off. We're being killed.
Being killed off.
Yeah.
You are what you
it's a
eat, and if you're eating food that is devoid of the right nutrients, devoid of these cancer-fighting
Well, you wouldn't get the cancer in the first place.
particles.
The point is with cancer is you don't get cancer unless you poison the body's energy field in complex number space. And you need to get across Mike Emery's work on the anu, right? The anu is a bifilar spiral energy field, and that spiral in the center is essentially the core energy field to our DNA, but the outer aspects of that energy field is not in 3D space, and that can be seen as a fuzzy sort of energy field around us, and that is the external aspects of the anu, which is not in 3D. So we have an energy field which is outside 3D, and what these ETs and other creatures do, and certain foods do, is it poisons the outside field of the energy field of our biofield, right? And then that spirals in to our DNA, and then the DNA gets corrupted, and then it starts producing things in 3D, which are essentially we call cancer.
But that's like, the fish in the sea.
Yeah.
They live in carrier bag soup, don't they now?
Carrier bag soup, and that's deliberately leached and put out there.
So the fish are eating,
There's crucial
drinking.
countries which are essentially producing that and producing their in Africa and other places. So that gets into the certain countries.
So it's getting into the fish. So it basically affects their cells, the shape of their cells.
Yeah.
And then you're eating the fish.
Yeah.
Which have got malformations of their cells. And so it's no wonder.
They're contaminating the bioenergetic field of the earth en masse. And they are also doing this in ceremonies and attacking the bioenergetic structures of the earth's living biology itself. And that's why we're attacking oil fields and fracking and all that. This is a bioenergetic attack on life in this world.
And look at 5G. So we've got 5G, which is also affecting our health. I've got a fellow Brexiteer, even though we weren't supposed to use the word Brexit. So what can you call us?
We just use
people
whatever
who want
words
freedom.
we want to describe what the.
We want the people who want their sovereignty back. So you've got 5G is now in a place called Lydney in the Forest of Dean. Of course, 5G is connected to smart meters. We've seen what's happened in California recently about how houses
Well,
that have had smart
The
meters in
thing
them.
about the smart meters is that they emit so much, they're basically a definite target for a house because it's emitting microwaves, right?
Yeah.
People call it Wi-Fi, but it's microwaves. Now, there has been a number of people see directed energy weapons, they're shortened to the term DEW, D-E-W, but Mark Steele, is it Mark or Max?
Mark Steele from Gateshead.
Mark Steele has got a very good observation on this in that weapons of that type are costly, they cost money, and the whole point of doing things like this is to do it cheaply. So what he is saying that is that a lot of the houses, the gas pressure was upped very high, which basically blew the governors in the air conditioning units, or basically vented from the air conditioning units, filling the houses with gas, which meant that they were primed for combustion. But other observers, in other words, you interviewed one called Dr. Mary Helen Hinesley, who is living in Ireland, and she actually witnessed a huge
cylinder in the sky. So
a
basically, it was
vertical
done
cylinder.
It was targeted, wasn't
and
it?
was
By the
in
global
Oregon.
corporations, presumably,
Yeah, yeah.
because they wanted to clear parts of California. And what they want to do is have statutory law in place to not allow people to go back to those areas. Depopulation. If it's happening in the US, it could easily happen here.
Well, it's that's what MK Ultra and all that's for.
So you see, you've got your 4G phones, rather, which emit 6 gigs. And you've got 5G in comparison.
Well, no, the phones don't emit 6 gigahertz. It's the
What's the
towers
4G?
feeding them.
The 4G. that
4G,
emits.
you've got to understand that the 1, 2, 3, 4G are all
Yep.
part of a wideband system, and of
So that's 6
mass
gigahertz.
communication. And the point is that Gabriel Cruz, who will be at the Christmas lunchtime lectures along with yourself in Devizes on the 16th of December. Caroline's going to be there, possibly talking about Brexit. I doubt it very much. I think she's just going
Or
to bring.
returning our sovereignty back.
And then we've got Gabriel Cruz, who is a cell phone engineer who installed cell phones in the Pacific Northwest, actually put the towers up. He found himself being targeted because he had a 3 gig antenna on his backpack and an 800 megahertz antenna on his backpack. And the two of those had such an effect that he started getting communication from insects, because the insects were having to frequency shift their communication systems, and then he actually had to bow
because
out.
they speak to each other by EMF.
Yeah, EMF. Yeah, so
Yeah.
they were communicating, and then they had to shift to another frequency so then they could communicate. So because he was actually putting the towers in, they found a gateway into his consciousness for them to communicate with him, and then he has found an awful lot more stuff out there, including a complete replica of Stonehenge, an active replica of Stonehenge.
Where was that?
In the Oregon desert, up in the mountains. It's sitting there. It's all connected with Masonic lodges and energy sites. So there's a huge network. Plus, he then has he found out about certain bloodlines, and that's another complicated thing about bloodlines.
Passes through DNA.
So
You've got
that's it,
basically
that's it.
California. You mentioned California. They have seen, with the rollout of 5G, a 500% increase in early dementia with people as young as 25. Now remember, we've got the food that we're eating is causing a huge increase in diabetes, lots and lots of different chronic illnesses.
And again, a lot of the information about why that's happening in Graham's books, there's the carbon
right.
fields is the other book that I'll cut up. He's done a number of books on all this, and not that one, this one, and it really is. If you read those books, you'll see it'll open your eyes to the planned attack on agriculture at a fundamental level to wipe us all out.
Unfortunately, it's all about profit. It's all about greed.
about-
It's the love of
About
money.
killing us proper.
The love of money is the root of all evil. And at the end of the day, you've got the corporations who've taken over our judicial system. We've got our parliament that is totally
Paid for.
complicit with this. Yes, the parliament's bought and paid for. You have a look at their financial interests. You look at the reasons why they actually went into parliament. referring to some street. Finchley Road. Thank you for reminding me. I'd almost forgotten.
Did Jonathan King not mention that in his in his book? Jonathan King mentioned that in his song in the 1960s.
Finchley Road, wasn't
Finchley
it?
Road on the Northern Line, or maybe Finchley Central. He's again whistleblowing in your face, laughing at us.
So Finchley Road, for those people at home who've not heard of Finchley Road as yet, this is where people set up companies, shell companies, so they have no employees, and it's a way of doing stuff with money, isn't it? Collecting money in.
Well, I think it may be in some way of using accounting to do something.
Creative accounting, and then a lot of these shell companies suddenly disappear, get dissolved, and then they set up another one. And they don't have to produce proper accounts. It's called the alternative investment market. Please do not invest in them at your peril. But people are getting away with it.
You've done a number of interviews with people on that, explain those people.
Certainly have. Shell companies.
Yeah,
Yep.
with who?
With Gordon Bowden.
Gordon Bowden.
Yes, so have a look at all the videos. He's
main
put
thing
out a
is,
lot
folks,
of his
is that
own.
there's an awful lot of videos on Stepping Stones to Awareness, which we've brought on for the BASIS project, which is basically so far ahead of things that just blow your head off. So rather than having your head blown off, you've got the beautiful Caroline here, who's getting across some of these things, which is so damn serious, it's scary.
It is, because it's rattling a few cages.
Scary.
Rattling a few cages. Anyway, without... have you got anything else to share, Miles?
Well, you got those books, very important. The whole pile of other books.
We just don't need these chemicals on the soil,
the thing
do we?
is, this is a planned attack on the body's biofield, which if you corrupt it energetically, then all the physical effects in 3D start appearing, and so therefore they need a 3D chemical to cure it, but it doesn't. It just toxifies you even more and kills you. At a profit. Got to have lots of profit in death. Make them ill and provide them with a solution. David Icke says problem, reaction, solution.
Yes, a solution.
Am I
Absolutely.
quoting the Bible or
And
David
hence
Icke?
why they're very interested in putting the NHS into private corporations.
Well, one of the things which happened with the NHS was the whole thing about the other thing about Valentine was that he implemented. He's also one of the founding members of the Scottish National Party. Yes,
And that's probably why they want to stay in the EU
and
then.
if you look at the legislation he brought in about a guardian, a state guardian, who was going to take care of your child the moment you conceive, that
The
is all
named
part.
person.
That's all part of MK Ultra programming within society through the health service.
And we won't even go into vaccines on this session.
Yeah, right.
Thank you very much for listening.
Oh, we're finished now. Well, the thing about finishing, you see, is I've got to go and switch this off, which means we're still live. Right?
So I've got to entertain people
So you've
whilst
got to
you go and
entertain people,
switch.
and then you'll hear the big click when I unplug the microphone, which is the big feature now of the BASIS series, to hearing that microphone being unplugged, finishing the show.
So the event's
So
on
you're
the
going to
16th.
be, the 16th, okay, this is Fast Blast. There's two things happening with the BASIS project. You can go to Egypt with Project Camelot. Do go to Project Camelot's website, projectcamelot.org or .tv, and book your trip to Egypt in April. We've got to get people in by December. So if only 5 people from BASIS go, it'll be wonderful. It's just absolutely fantastic. Maria Wheatley's there, the brilliant Maria Wheatley, the brilliant Kerry Cassidy, that's also being interviewed by the beautiful Caroline here. Named after Radio Caroline. What's that? Why do we have to have Radio Caroline? A pirate ship. Anyway, the other thing is, the other thing is you've got on December the 16th, the Black Swan Inn in Devizes. It's only a tenner in. You're going to have Mark Steele on Skype, and he's going to talk about 5G and all sorts of stuff like that. Military weaponization of weapons grade stuff in the wider public domain. Gabe Cruz, who's kicked off the whole thing about the aspect of cell phone technology. He's a cell phone engineer, built the things, installed them, tested them and maintained the towers in America. He's insider. He's done an awful lot more research. and he's in trouble. He needs some help. If you're able to donate to his thing that we did an update on. Mark Steele and Gabe Cruz on 5G via Skype, December the 16th at the Black Swan Inn. Book your Christmas lunch as soon as you can, because that will be available for you when you have Christmas lunches after post-lunch lectures. Michael Shrimpton will talk about Brexit, and Caroline might talk about Brexit. Michael Shrimpton has written a book about secret German intelligence. So he's done a major research on that. He's been jailed, had a hard time, lots of shit happening to him. And we've got you, and then we've got Eurosol, the base's webmaster, will be talking about the class action lawsuit against Facebook over censorship. And we've got the wonderful Mike Embry. He'll be coming down from Warrington, and we'll be talking about the orgone bubble, the organic bubble, because the Atomic Energy Commission in the United States has said you can't say orgone anymore. They jailed Wilhelm Reich about that.
Well, I guess that chap who's going to be talking about internet censorship, presumably he's going to talk about the Article 11, Article 13.
I don't know.
But this is, you know, the Stella Creasy bill. People like Jacob Rees-Mogg has been supportive of internet censorship. And I think, as you're finding out, running the BASIS project, that's going to have serious implications for
YouTube
people
actually,
out there.
YouTube's actually done a thing on that. They're putting a thing up about that.
Anyway, thank you, Miles,
anyway, that's
for this.
the tenor, December 16th. Book your Christmas dinner. Phone the Black Swan Inn by the, I think the 2nd of December. No, the 9th of December, that weekend to book your Christmas lunch. It's a Christmas lunch celebration on the 16th of December, and we all have a bit of serious lectures, and then we all relax and have a nice time. So I will cut you up, and then you can say all the rest of it. And Alan.
Well, thanks for that, Miles. I also do a Monday night show on a website called writeunity.co.uk. So you can look me up there. This past Monday, we have all the shows archived. Monday just gone, we've had Mark Steele on there and two girls talking about visiting a Freemason church. And also I go on to an international website called Air TV, which is set in Spain. And I do that on a weekly basis as well. And I believe that one of Miles's friends, Ben Emlyn Jones, he also has just recently interviewed me, so look out for that. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and see you again soon.